privileged to be able to host. We're joined today by Debra and Marc Tice, the parents of Austin Tice, an American journalist who was detained in Syria more than 6 years ago. Before we get underway and before I give a formal introduction of Marc and Debra, I'd like to play a video that they have brought to us here today. Melanie? All right. Once again, on behalf of the UN Correspondents Association, I'd like to welcome you to a press conference with Debra and Marc Tice, the parents of Austin Tice. My name is Luke Vargas. I am a correspondent here for the American radio company Talk Media News. The video we just saw, I believe, was supposed to have some narration, though you may have been able to tell just from the images that one of the points that Austin's parents wanted to make with this video was to show how much has happened since he has been detained in Syria. As you saw, it's been 6 years. It's more headlines than we can count. Good news, bad news has all transpired while he's been away from home. Austin Tice was finishing his time at Georgetown Law when he decided to go to Syria, feeling compelled to tell stories of civilians who were caught up in that conflict, which, as someone who's followed the Syrian war for a long time, is a vital role that all too few journalists played then and still play now, reporting on the human impact of a war that most people cover in its political domain or aspects only. Austin was detained near Damascus in August of 2012. Recently, his parents have given some interviews describing some new indications that they have that confirm Austin is still alive and detained, and I want them to share that information with you. It's not for me to summarize that, so that's something we will get to in a minute. I don't have very much to say, only that in all of the interviews I've seen with both of you and in the conversations I've had with those individuals who are helping to secure Austin's release, there's one message that I keep hearing loud and clear, which is that you want the story of your son and the story of others who are detained, particularly journalists, around the world to be told. This is something of a philosophical split among those connected to. We have seen that in in ways that are important to us here at the UN, but maybe not beyond our borders. When the UN Correspondents Association speaks up, the UN listens, and when journalists, we've recently seen in the case in Myanmar, speak up and they amplify stories of journalists in peril, it may not lead to their immediate release or may not change what governments do immediately. But I think when journalists go on the record and take a stand, it's important. We can do important things. And finally, I think for journalists to be involved in efforts where we get together and we fight for one another, it has positive effects for us as well. We are in an industry where there is often a sense that we can all do it alone. We're sort of a hero's syndrome in journalism. But yet, when we multiply our voices together, it helps us realize that we can't do this work alone. We need our editors, we need our employers to help us, and God forbid something happen, we actually could rely on each other, perhaps even in life-saving ways. So it means a lot to see some familiar faces here, people who I think share that sentiment. Without further ado, I want to turn this over to Debra and Marc Tice, and after they give some opening remarks, I'm going to ask the room. Debra and Marc Tice, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Luke, and thank you for hosting. Thank the UNCA for hosting us here. We very much appreciate it. We also thank Reporters Without Borders, represented by Margot here, and the Committee to Protect Journalists, Courtney Justin. Thank you very much for helping to make this happen. And most of all, thank you to everyone here that's attending. We very much appreciate your interest in our son's story. And with that, we would like to introduce our son, Austin Tice, to you.
Thank you all for being here. Austin is the eldest of our 7 children. He was a big baby who grew into a big man with a big personality and a big heart. He loves being the big brother to his 6 younger siblings, their protector and advisor. Austin is an avid reader and has always taken a keen interest in world history. Early on, his desire to know about the world grew into a passion for news of global politics. He grew up listening to public radio. We believe he became a journalist when he first inked his knees crawling across the Sunday paper. As his own world expanded, his desire to understand grew into a sense of duty wrapped in a heart of compassion. He first learned to lead through service as he became an Eagle Scout. Then he gained a greater understanding of international politics when he graduated from Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service. His sense of duty led him to become an esteemed captain in the United States Marine Corps. Most recently, all of his interests and his passions and his experience coalesced into a call to bear witness in Syria. Austin began reporting from Syria in May 2012. On August 14th, 2012, 6 years, one month and 4 days ago, he was detained at a checkpoint near Damascus. He remains captive in Syria today. We are here to continue to raise awareness of Austin's detention and to advocate for his safe release.
It's fitting that we're speaking to you at the campus of the United Nations on the eve of the General Assembly. 2 mandates of the United Nations are especially relevant to Austin's case: freedom of information and international engagement. The 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights affirms as fundamental human rights the freedom of expression, and access to accurate information regardless of frontiers. Even so, today, we find that journalists worldwide are in greater danger than ever before. The insidious tendency to restrict information and control opinion is at risk of becoming an acceptable norm. This is happening from the top down and from the bottom up and squeezing out the middle. We cringe when governments restrict information and disallow free speech, yet we increasingly accept the creation of our own echo chambers on Facebook and Twitter, and by only consuming news which affirms our views, thereby becoming intolerant of dissenting opinions, deaf to debate, and immune to the expansion of ideas. This growing acceptance inevitably leads to the erosion of safety for information bearers, including journalists.
Austin went to Syria as a photographer. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Austin wanted people to see how armed conflict, particularly in an urban environment, affects the innocent, especially children. Soon, he was writing articles to accompany his photos and describe what he was seeing. Austin was honored for his journalistic skills with the McClatchy President's Award, a George Polk Award, and other significant recognitions.
We believe Austin is detained because of his journalistic endeavors. We're asking you, Austin's colleagues, to join us in continuing to raise awareness of Austin's detention as we continue to work for his safe release. We implore all of you, in the course of your work, ask about Austin, create opportunities to draw attention to the urgency of securing Austin's safe return.
As member nations gather for the 73rd General Assembly, we are mindful that in its charter, the United Nations commits to promoting international cooperation in resolving humanitarian issues. Our family is intensely aware there is suffering all across the Levant. We pray and hope there will soon be an end to violence, restoration of families, and the beginning of healing. We have every reason to believe Austin is alive and yearning to walk free. We fiercely miss Austin and long to have him safely home. We want to have all of our family around the table again.
Because Austin is an American, and because he's detained in Syria, we urge both the United States government and the Syrian government to work together to resolve this humanitarian issue.
We are very much encouraged by recent reports of direct discussions between Syrian and United States officials, which include Austin's situation. And we intend to relentlessly push for these discussions to continue. A genuine and collaborative effort must be put forth by both governments in order to resolve this humanitarian issue without further delay. 2,226 days is much too long. It is time for Austin to walk free. Both governments have assured us, and we have spoken to both governments relentlessly. They will do all they can to secure Austin's safe release. We call on them now more than ever to honor that commitment. Bring our son home.
Thank you. That's the end of our statement, Luke.
Thank you very much for sharing those words with us. I have two very brief questions, and then I'm going to open up to questions from the floor. The first is perhaps a little background that would have been addressed had there been the narration on that video, but it does detail some of the efforts you've made to secure your son's release, campaigns, outreach campaigns to the Newseum in Washington, D.C., and others who have amplified message about your son's continued detention. Could you walk us through just sort of, I know you've been to Damascus, you've spent time there. Your family has lobbied governments, talked to representatives of the American and Syrian governments. Could you just describe sort of in any way that you can the extent of the efforts that you've taken so far to secure your son's release?
This is a great question. And we just recently got a new special presidential envoy for hostage affairs. So Mark and I thought it would be good to give him a history of all that we had done as we began this new relationship. And we had a 3-hour meeting with him where we gave him the most abbreviated version we could come up with over the last 6 years, just of the things that we have done, the places that we have been, the people we have spoken to. There are things that shock me when I say them out loud because I am a stay-at-home mom. I always stayed at home with our 7 children. I'm great at spaghetti and diapers. And so when I look back and I realized that I lived in a conflict zone with internally displaced people in Damascus for 3.5 months, I become so acutely aware that there was nothing in my life that prepared me for that. And when we are frustrated because we asked for a call from the Secretary of State yesterday and we still haven't heard back from him. We just kind of step back and say, who are these people? Because that's so different from our pre-hostage family life.
Yeah, so, as you said, Luke, Debra spent months living in Damascus. We've made multiple trips to the region, not only to Syria, but to Lebanon, to Beirut, because frequently that's as close as we can get without receiving visas to cross the border into Syria. Countless trips to Washington, D.C., many trips here to speak with various officials of the United Nations. The campaigns that you mentioned, the blindfold campaign that you saw on the video, which, the other thing that it would be a huge failing not to mention is that we've had a tremendous amount of support from a number of different places. Media organizations, NGOs like Reporters Without Borders and CPJ. In the blindfold campaign, they arranged for, I think it was over 200 media organizations to put a banner on their website, Free Austin Tice, with a link to more information. Full-page ads in the Washington Post, the New York Times. We ourselves have done innumerable interviews on every network and with so many print media. And I have to say, when we ask you to help us with the awareness piece, for over 6 years, we have been pushing as hard as we can. And all the things that I talked about, have been done. And yet, we still have people, when they first learn about Austin's situation, ask us, have you thought about going public? And it's incredibly heartbreaking, I guess, that all the effort we've made, it's so difficult to get into people's consciousness. If they're not watching a particular network when our interview is on, then they miss it and don't think it ever happened.
And it's not just that we want people to be aware of Austin's detention. We believe that as people become aware and they raise their voices to their government, to our government, and say it's important to us for this journalist to be freed, that creates a groundswell of encouragement and pressure in the places where it matters most.
Yeah, and I would add too, because I didn't mention this, when we travel to the region, we hold press conferences. We do interviews with regional media, newspapers, radio, people that distribute and broadcast in the Middle East, particularly Lebanon, Syria, that region. So to the extent that anyone here represents, or anyone seeing this and hearing this represents a media organization in that region, we ask you to do the same thing. Awareness that Austin remains detained, that we continue every day to work for and be ready for him to come home, to safely and come home and regain his freedom. Spreading that information can only help.
My other question for you, over a 6-year period, there must have been many moments where you thought perhaps the tides in the Syrian conflict were changing, maybe some development in the United States government, a shakeup of personnel or a reorientation of priorities spells maybe a positive moment for advancing word about your son's detention. I'm curious, there are two things that jump to mind about the present moment. One, within Syria, the Syrian government is poised to take control of some areas of the country they have not had control over since the beginning of the Syrian conflict. I'm wondering what it's like to watch developments coming from that country. And back home, under President Trump, this administration does seem to have put a priority on bringing back Americans who are held overseas, be it in North Korea, Venezuela, and elsewhere. I'm curious how you've reacted to that development as well.
So I'm going to let you answer this after I just say.
Sure.
Mark and I can read the news, watch the sky, look into our cereal bowl, and we can always find a reason that today is the perfect day. Everything has lined up. Today is a perfect day for Austin to come home. We can find a reason every single day.
Yes, and to answer your question directly, so yes, Austin, as we said in our prepared remarks, we believe that his detention is a result of him working effectively as a journalist in the midst of the Syrian conflict. So clearly, that conflict, the fact that it existed, is largely, if not entirely, responsible for the motivation to detain Austin and silence him. So yes, we do believe that an end to the conflict is a positive thing for Austin. Although I have to say this, because no one has directly taken responsibility and claimed to be accountable for Austin's detention, we can't tell you, and we wish we could, exactly why he was detained, why he's still being held. So the end of the conflict, yes, we hope would be positive. It certainly will be positive for the people, the innocent people that Austin took so many pictures of, that have suffered, been displaced, lost loved ones, had their lives destroyed. And we're humbled every time we, get to Lebanon, see refugees, listen to people's stories. Debra's experience in Damascus was amazing in talking to the people that she lived with and talked with, how both resilient but also how tragic their lives are. So, that's the important thing from a human perspective, that the suffering end, the violence
But
stop.
also, the end of the conflict inevitably will mean greater engagement, that all the governments that have a play in the region are going to have to be talking to each other. And they're going to be thinking about the conflict is winding down and now looking forward to rebuilding. And so as those governments engage, we press that the humanitarian issues be resolved at the front of that effort.
And my
Yeah.
other point on American priorities as it pertains to
Yeah.
detained
Yes.
persons.
Yes, no, I mean, we've been incredibly encouraged by the fact that this administration clearly has a focus on bringing home Americans that are detained overseas. And they've got a tremendous track record. We have, when, in January of 2017, when the transition from one administration to another came, we frankly thought, here we go again. We're going to have to bring up to speed a whole new administration, new Secretary of State, new, National Security Council, new players at every agency and department. What we found on our first trip to Washington after the change of administrations was that most of that work had been done for us by the career people in the government that have continued to work on Austin's case, carried that information forward, briefed all the new officials that came in. And so we don't feel like we stepped back too far, maybe half a step. As Deborah said, we spent hours with the new special presidential envoy for hostages that was appointed. But, that was very encouraging. And again, as we said, we have had commitments from the very top of the United States government that they will be and they are working hard to bring Austin safely home.
Thanks for indulging me on that second point in
Yeah,
particular.
sure.
Syrian American newspaper. I have a couple of questions about your sons. I hope he's safe and everything,
Thank you.
and he returned home.
Thank you.
The question, when he left this country, where he go? Through Damascus or Aleppo or Hama? Maybe I could help. That question is important because Damascus have nothing over there. No war, no fight, no nothing. So must be he went to somewhere where the war is up. Homs, Hama, Raqqa, Aleppo.
Right.
Where? The last time he called you from where?
Daraya.
Daraya,
The
that's,
Damascus
suburbs of the
Yes.
Damascus. Yeah,
In
okay.
suburbs
Yes.
of Damascus. He had been and he entered through Antakya,
Antakya, Turkey, okay.
and then he made his way down.
Aleppo through to this, to
Correct.
Hama, Homs to Damascus.
Homs, Idlib,
Yeah,
Right.
Idlib.
all the way down.
No, Idlib that's close to Turkey right away.
Right,
He
right,
went
right.
to Aleppo, Hama, Homs, and suburbs of Damascus.
Correct.
Yes. Yes.
After that, you don't hear nothing from him because that area, that time, is ISIS. Is ISIS controlled by that? It's not the free army from Syria.
Not Daraa.
Daraya, yes.
Not Daraya. Well, to be clear, at that time, remember this is
I'm a
August.
journalist. I know
Yes,
what's
yes,
going on.
2012. ISIS
was not yet an issue in Syria.
was not yet an issue in Syria. There was some Al Qaeda presence, but
There's no Qaeda in Syria. I'm just telling you what's the.
not now. In 2012, there was,
Right.
but ISIS had not yet emerged.
In-
Where Austin was taken, because we know where he was in Daraya when he left, and he was leaving the country. So he was last seen leaving Daraya.
Daraya,
No one saw him be detained, to our knowledge, but that was
He
the
left
last
Daraya
place.
by himself or
He
has
left
with a group?
Daraya by himself.
No,
Yes.
by-
No group?
No, not with a group.
He's
No,
a
he
freelancer.
traveled.
So
He traveled
so
by
he's
himself.
missing over there. Did you call over here the ambassador Bashar Jafari about that? About this kind of person? The ambassador of the UN, Syrian ambassador.
He will not meet with
Yes,
them.
we've tried to meet with him and haven't been able to get a
We've tried
meeting.
meet with him for 6 years, and he has not ever
Yeah.
accepted a meeting. with
Never.
us. Never.
Yeah.
Even phone call or emails or something?
Never.
Yep.
At all.
However, we have spoken with other Syrian officials. We've met a number of times with the Syrian ambassador to Lebanon.
So that means he's locked
So-
up. The 100% was the government, Syrian government.
We don't know that. We wish we knew that.
They
with
refuse to
certainty.
to call you or to respond, or must be he's there. He's in life.
Well, that's
That's
Jafari,
most
who we
important.
haven't spoken with.
He's in life.
Yes,
Thank you, Yassine.
Yeah.
yes,
We
that
talked about
is
that.
most important.
Yep.
I'm gonna make
That is most
some
important.
an article and page for to be asked to be free him to Austin. God bless him.
Thank you.
He
Thank
will
you so
return home
much.
inshallah very soon.
Inshallah. Shukran, Yassine.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Thank you for your remarks. I just wanted to ask you, at this particular crucial time with the conflict winding down in Syria, what can NGOs, what can journalists, and what can individuals do to keep the pressure constant on Austin's case? I know you touched a little bit on this earlier, but I just wanted to get some more specific recommendations for us.
Okay. Thank you so much, Margot. So 2 answers. It's a 2-piece question. For journalists, we just ask that we have asked repeatedly, especially of the Washington Post and McClatchy News, to have a day counter banner, but we've never been able to achieve that. But we would just like for that kind of a daily reminder, because Austin is the only American journalist being held anywhere in the world. He's the one, and we would like to see his colleagues foment for his release. So every way that you can think of to do that, that's what we ask. We ask for everything, all of it. As far as the people that you're reporting to, the people that hear us, the people that know about this, you may have noticed that especially football teams have cheerleaders. Not because the cheerleaders have any kind of athletic skills. They are there to encourage the players to do their best. We, as Americans, do not allow our citizens to be detained against their will. Get this man home. That's what we would like to see. It is important to me. It can be a 1-sentence contact. It is important to me for Austin Tice to be returned safely home.
Is there anyone else?
Thank you, Stefano Vaccara for Radio Radicale in Rome and La Voce in New York. I have a specific question, it's about the UN. I mean, UN has, of course, contact, it's probably the only one that has contact with all the moment in Syria who could have your son, so the government and other factions. So what kind of contact did you have with the UN, with Special Envoy de Mistura, if you ever talked to him, or does he know about the situation of his son? And then I didn't understand, maybe I didn't understand, but is the U.S. government knows who, probably if it's the government, the Syrian government, or some fraction, rebels? Because that's very, I think, is also very
Right.
important to if you know.
Tell me your name again.
Stefano Vaccara.
Stefan?
Stefano.
Stefano. Stefano? Have I got it right? It would not be prudent for us to share details of everything that we know. No one has claimed responsibility for holding Austin. Think tanks, educational, journalistic, governmental. What more can we do? This is the question we're always asking. If this were your son, what would you do? What would you do? What more can we do? Whatever is suggested to us, we will do it without hesitation. we will pursue every channel, every effort, speak to anyone, sleep anywhere, go anywhere that we believe will push that door behind which our son is hidden open.
And if,
Wait, let him.
I don't want you to, maybe, okay, I don't want you to tell us who, if the U.S. government or somebody told you who held your son, but do you know?
I just can't answer that. I'm so sorry, Stefano.
I do want to respond to the first part of your question, though. And we have met with a number of UN officials. We spoke early on to Staffan de Mistura when he took his role. We had spoken to his predecessor. And you know, our message and our request to the United Nations, to senior officials, has been the same message that we gave here. The purpose, one of the purposes of the United Nations is to facilitate collaboration, communication, resolution of humanitarian issues between countries. And that has been our request, that the United Nations act in that capacity. Because, as Deborah said, Austin being an American, we know he was detained in Syria. We know he remains in Syria. And so the government of the country of Syria, between them and the United States government, they certainly have the capability and resources to free Austin and bring him home. And that's, I'm afraid, as detailed as we can get with you.
Anyone else? If not, I have another question I'd like to ask both of you. You've mentioned what the Syrian and American governments can do. They can, as this conflict winds down, they can prioritize resolving outstanding humanitarian issues, including your son's release.
Absolutely.
You've talked about what the public can do. You've talked awareness. You've talked about what reporters can do, writing stories and circulating news about your son. I'm curious, as someone, and I'm sure there are others in this room who are interested in the news industry writ large, have you received support in kind or in other ways logistically from some of the outlets that your son reported for? And do you think that the fact that he was working as a freelancer as opposed to, let's say, a full-time reporter for a major news outlet hindered efforts to track him down in the days and months after his detention?
Well, keep in mind, this was 2012. The world has changed a lot, right? Thanks be to God for the better for journalists, without a doubt. But
For freelance journalists.
for freelance journalists, things have improved. Because yes, we do believe the fact that Austin was a freelancer and everyone that published his work could stand back and say, well, he's not our man. It's not our responsibility. And we do think that step back was especially critically detrimental in the earliest days.
Yeah.
It's not that way anymore, but the price for that change has been very high.
Yeah, and that being said, a slight hesitation, and it wasn't a hesitation by his colleagues in the region, because immediately upon everyone being aware that something was amiss, he hadn't spoken to anyone in 24, 48 hours. Immediately, his colleagues, the other journalists that are reporting in the region, started speaking to their fixers, talking to their contacts, reaching out to everyone that they talked to, and so that happened. And since then, we've had, yes, very much logistical and other kinds of support from McClatchy Corporation, McClatchy News, from the Washington Post. Those are the two primary outlets that Austin submitted to and was published by. But yes, we do feel like just that the very beginning, if you talk to experts, they will all tell you that the first few days are critical in a situation like this. And there were a few days of hesitation from the hierarchy of the media organizations that were probably very important. I mean, I will say that by November, the then editor and then foreign editor of the Washington Post did travel to the Middle East, traveled to Lebanon in an effort to, gather information. But that was already 3 months on.
Yeah.
And finally, I just want to ask about the communities that you've leaned on for support over the last 6 years. I think it speaks volumes that Reporters Without Borders and Committee to Protect Journalists are here and have been joining you in this campaign. I'm curious, you both mentioned that you still closely watch developments in Syria and pray for the people there. I'm curious if Syrian, civilian groups have opened their arms to you. What about POW groups? I'm just curious what's surprising, perhaps, centers of community have come through.
Thank you so much for a second pass at this question, because I want to make sure that you understand, in the very first days, McClatchy News stepped in mightily to support us and to support our family. Trying to figure out what efforts to deploy for Austin was more complicated, but the support for us was immediate and unflagging to this very moment. So I just want to be really clear about that. So what was the question?
Unexpected.
Oh, unexpected.
They don't need to be unexpected.
Or surprising or interesting. I have a couple of answers if
All
you
right.
want to think about it for
Yeah.
a minute. Okay, so first of all, we have Syrians have reached out to us, individuals. One of the things that I can say without any hesitation is everyone that we have learned encountered Austin while he was reporting in Syria has been fond of him, appreciated him, and we've had groups and individuals contact us. It still happens today through an email, a Skype call or something like that from people just reaching out to us and saying, "Hey, I saw your son. I encountered your son when he was in Syria, and I'm praying for you. Our family's praying for you." So that's incredibly gratifying. And the other thing is that even though it's frustrating that we can't get everyone in the world, much less everyone in the United States, aware of Austin's situation, it's wonderful when someone from, I'm making this up a little bit, but something like this has happened more than once. Someone in Idaho will email us and say, my grandfather was Syrian, and I still have, family relatives in the Middle East. Maybe they can help you. I've passed this information on to them. So support from
That's where awareness becomes so important.
unknown and
because
unexpected
you just never know
places.
who's going to hear and reach out or hear and think about a connection that they have. And, that was one thing that was hugely uplifting for me. I'm Catholic, and going into the region, I realized I have like this huge family with all these different branches, right, that I was completely unaware of. But in this crisis, these branches are one family, and eat together, pray together, hope for a greater future together. And that has been a source of tremendous strength for me, meeting my extended family. Yeah.
Oh, one more question.
Thank you so much for being here. I wanted to just ask if you could describe your month to us. What are you up to? What is, a month in the life of the Tice family right now? To the extent that you can say.
So think about an old-fashioned popcorn popper. There you go. Perfect metaphor for our life. Just all kinds of things just exploding in a tiny contained dome. Yeah, that's pretty much sums it up. And, I used to be a big planner. I'm a very much an alphabetical order, color-coded, let's have everything organized person. And now I realize just wake up and go with it, because it doesn't matter. I don't even get to have a skeleton outline of what might happen today, because we may get a phone call, right? And that phone call sets the rest of the day as we first react and then respond. Yeah, it's completely unpredictable. And we're still a big family. We have 7 children. Austin's just the most troublesome right now. But the 6 others also have a love and a need for their parents. And, we have 4 beautiful grandchildren. And so, yes, life is more and more unpredictable, truly.
Yeah.
And, my idea of this summer was to spend as much time as possible with my 8-year-old granddaughter. It was a summer that she didn't have a lot planned. And I spent 5 weeks of this summer in Washington, D.C., and 1 week in Rome, never on vacation. So, it really, my plans are just irrelevant.
Yeah, an average month will include at least one trip to either Washington or somewhere else to pursue, either advocate or pursue information about Austin. It will include multiple calls from both government and individuals that are supporting us, and they're seeking information and working on Austin's case.
Fielding emails, you haven't answered my email, or haven't seen you on Twitter. Is everything okay? I'm like, I finally just laid Twitter aside. I just can't be expected 5 times a day to let you know what's going on, or it just doesn't even matter, right? So just those kind of things too, and being able to say what is the most effective? What is the most effective way to spend our time? And I want to answer that with the babies, obviously, but I don't always get to have that answer.
Debra and Marc Tice, thank you both so much for sharing your story and the story of your son with us at the UN Correspondents Association today, and to CPJ and Reporters Without Borders for helping to set this up as well. Some questions that people would prefer to ask off the camera. Maybe we can spend a few minutes doing that here. Thank you again.
And thanks to all of you for being here. Thank you.